The hearing room was colder than it looked. Not because of the towering marble pillars or the polished stone floors, but because of the air. Thick, tight, like it was holding its breath. Rows of polished seats held senators, press, and aides, each pretending they were just another observer. But everyone knew something was coming, something big. At the center of the room sat JD Vance, Vice President of the United States, tall, composed, and armed with a grin that could cut steel. Across from him, Denzel Washington sat quietly, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. The cameras were already live, and the silence felt like the world had stopped spinning. Earlier that morning, Denzel had walked through the underground parking of the Capitol building, past guards who nodded but didn't speak. His lawyer, an older man with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel, walked beside him, carrying the slim black briefcase. "They think this is about Medicaid," the lawyer said, quietly. "But it's not. It's about control." Denzel didn't answer. He was focused, not on the lawsuit itself, but on what would follow. Because this wasn't just legal. It was personal. 40-8 hours before, a live broadcast had shown JD Vance chuckling during a Senate hearing. He had just dismissed a question about cutting Medicaid coverage for over 2 million Americans. Denzel, sitting in the gallery, had stood up and asked one question, not as an actor, but as a citizen. What happens to the children who can't afford to breathe? JD Vance smirked. The microphone, meant for recording floor discussions, picked up his reply. Maybe they shouldn't have been born. It was a joke. A cruel, careless one. But in that instant, it turned into something irreversible. Denzel's face didn't change. He just sat back down. But the internet exploded. And so did the nation. What nobody knew, not even the closest staffers in the White House, was that Denzel had been recording a private meeting. Weeks earlier, Denzel had been invited to a charity dinner in Ohio. JD Vance was there. They shook hands. But in a quiet corner of the room, with wine glasses clinking and donors laughing nearby, JD leaned in and said something Denzel never forgot. "We're going to gut every program that keeps the weak on life support. That's the plan. Leaner, stronger America. Not everyone makes the cut." The smile on his face as he said it, cold, rehearsed. Denzel had slipped a mic into his cuff that night, just in case. Not out of suspicion, but instinct. Now, that instinct was about to rip through Washington like a storm no one saw coming. "Mr. Washington," a voice echoed through the chamber. It was Senator Graham, chairing the committee hearing. "You may proceed." Denzel stood slowly, not with drama, but with weight. The kind of weight a man carries when he's not just fighting for himself, but for millions who will never sit in that room, never speak into a microphone, never be heard unless someone carries their voice forward. He opened a folder, one page. He read it silently before placing it down. "This is a federal lawsuit," he said calmly, "against Vice President JD Vance. $100 million. For defamation, negligence, and conspiracy to dismantle public health protections while knowingly endangering lives." JD laughed, not loudly, just enough to send a ripple through the room. "Is this a movie pitch, Denzel?" he said, "or are you actually serious?" Denzel didn't flinch. "I'm serious," he replied, "and I brought the tape." At that moment, every phone buzzed. Every journalist's screen lit up. The tape, the one from the dinner, had just been leaked. Not by Denzel, but by someone unknown. Someone. Inside, the audio was clean. Jade's voice was unmistakable. And the words? Unforgettable. Social feeds crashed. Networks broke into programming. Denzel didn't have to play the hero. The truth did it for him. JD single quotes S face paled. Not all at once, slowly. Like a man realizing he had just walked off a cliff. "We need a recess." One of the senators barked, but Denzel raised his voice, not shouting, but enough to hold the room. You don't need a recess. You need a reckoning. Cameras zoomed in on JD. Reporters outside were shouting into microphones. America was watching, not just a lawsuit, but a line in history being drawn between power and accountability, between arrogance and truth. And the world was waiting for JD Vance's next move, because one sentence had started the fire, and Denzel Washington had just poured gasoline on it. The hallway outside the hearing chamber was chaos. Staffers with headsets sprinted past glass doors. Reporters barked questions into live cameras, and a swarm of aides formed a shield around JD Vance like ants scurrying to protect their shaken queen. But inside that marble room, everything was still. Not quiet, still. Like the moment after a thunderclap when the world forgets how to breathe. Jade sat stiffly at the witness table, his jaw clenched so tight it seemed like it might crack. He wasn't smirking now. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for an exit. There was none. Denzel hadn't moved. He stood like a stone, not angry, not triumphant, just firm. Behind him, his lawyer placed the briefcase on the table and clicked it open. He pulled out a stack of documents, bound in black clips, each stamped with a federal court seal. Copies of the lawsuit already filed. The suit wasn't just about the dinner recording. It detailed meetings, emails, and memos that painted a damning picture. A systematic attempt by Vance's inner circle to cut health programs, while manipulating public perception through media allies and carefully staged town halls. The senator moderating the session, a stern woman from Colorado with decades of legal experience, leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "Mr. Washington, are you alleging that the vice president intentionally misled this body and the American public?" "No," Denzel replied, his voice even. "I'm proving it." JD leaned into his mic. "This is outrageous. We're in the middle of a global crisis, and this man, an actor, thinks he can hijack a national platform because he didn't like a comment made in jest?" "Jest?" Denzel's lawyer said, rising now. "A vice president joking that children without health coverage shouldn't be born. That's not jest. That's a declaration of intent. And we have documents, audio, and testimony to back it." The senator turned to JD. "Mr. Vice President, would you like to respond under oath?" For a second, JD said nothing. Then he smiled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll respond," he said, "but not here. This is a media circus." "Then step into the ring," Denzel shot back, his tone colder now. "You turned this into a stage when you mocked real suffering. Now it's your turn under the lights." The crowd in the back gasped. A few senators shifted uncomfortably. But the tension wasn't from the drama. It was the truth behind it. Millions were watching online. Social media platforms were ablaze. Hashtags like #ReckoningDay and #TapeTruth were trending worldwide. Somewhere in the mix, Denzel's words from the Senate floor were already clipped, captioned, and going viral. One sentence had begun to feel like a movement. A clerk entered the room and handed the senator a note. She read it and nodded. "We've been notified that the White House is watching this hearing live," she said. "They are requesting an emergency briefing." Jade froze. Denzel, however, turned to the audience behind him. Seated in the second row was a woman, older, gray hair tied neatly behind her head, her hands folded tightly. Her eyes locked with Denzel's. She gave him the smallest nod. Her name was Gloria, a retired nurse. She had lost her husband when he was denied treatment during a brief Medicaid gap caused by one of the very policy changes JD had pushed. Denzel had met her last year at a fundraiser. Her story had stayed with him ever since. And now she was here to testify. "Your Honor," Denzel said, "I call Gloria Hall as my first witness." Jade's team erupted. "You can't call witnesses in a Senate hearing." But the senator held up her hand. "This isn't an ordinary hearing anymore. This has become a matter of national credibility. Gloria walked to the witness table, slowly gripping her purse like a lifeline. The silence in the chamber returned, deep, heavy, almost holy. She sat down and adjusted the microphone. "My name is Gloria Hall," she said. "I was married for 47 years. My husband worked as a janitor for most of it. He got sick. And because of one policy change, a change made by Vice President Vance's task force, his coverage lapsed for 36 days. He died on day 35. Even JD looked shaken. Not because he cared, but because the optics were crumbling. "I'm not here for revenge," Gloria continued. "I'm here because I don't want the next family to go through what I did. I want the people who make these choices to see the faces they affect." Her voice cracked on the last sentence. Denzel reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. Across the room, Jade's aide whispered into his ear, their voice low but visible. Jade's face darkened. He knew. The numbers were changing. Public support was flipping. Fast. "This hearing is now suspended pending review," the senator said, banging her gavel once. "But the American people are watching. And they deserve answers." Outside, the media frenzy had reached fever pitch. Headlines were already predicting a constitutional standoff. The Justice Department issued a statement, carefully worded, but signaling interest. Insiders leaked that the president was furious, blindsided by JD's comments and political recklessness. But inside Denzel's mind, none of that mattered. Not yet, because he knew something else. The real tape, the one no one had heard yet, the one from a secret meeting between JD and a private donor, it was worse. It wasn't just about Medicaid. It was about buying votes, rigging messaging, and erasing whistleblowers. And that tape was coming next. The nation wasn't just watching anymore, it was holding its breath. In homes, cafes, offices, and newsrooms, the name Denzel Washington was no longer trending because of a new film. This was bigger. It was raw. It was personal. Everywhere you turned, people were replaying Gloria Hall's voice, analyzing JD Vance's silence, and dissecting every second of the leaked dinner recording. But what no one expected was that it wasn't the only one. That morning, Denzel sat in a quiet corner of a private DC law office. Sunlight filtered through frosted glass as his lawyer clicked play on his second recording. Denzel listened, his face still, his hands on the table. Across from him sat a former congressional staffer, nervous, pale, sweating through his collar. He looked young, maybe 30. His name was Trey. A ghost to the system now, but once JD Vance's personal legislative advisor. Trey had disappeared 3 months ago after refusing to draft a bill that would privatize pediatric Medicaid. Now he was back with something nuclear. "It's from a closed-door meeting," Trey said, voice barely a whisper. "Private home. Donor dinner. JD didn't know I was still in the room." On the tape, JD's voice was clear, sharper than before. "If we can spin this as an efficiency overhaul, no one will notice the terminations until it's too late. We bury the cuts in language no one understands, redistribution of funds, pilot programs, whatever works. The press won't catch it unless someone spells it out." Someone else, a donor by the sound of it, replied, "What? About backlash from progressives?" JD had laughed. Cold, dismissive. That's where the entertainment folks come in. Flood the narrative. Get 1 or 2 Hollywood types to look like they're overreacting. Call it elite hysteria. People will eat it up. The room in the law office was silent again. Trey looked like he might vomit. "They were going to use you," he said. "They wanted you to snap, to get angry on live TV. That way, they could discredit everything you ever said, make you the face of rage instead of reason." Denzel didn't speak for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the window, and finally turned back. "We're not just suing anymore," he said. "We're going to take this to the people." That night, Denzel sat down with a trusted journalist for an emergency primetime interview. The second tape wasn't played immediately. First came context. The backstory, the policies, the hidden consequences. And then, at the peak of the broadcast, the journalist leaned forward and asked, "Do you have any further evidence that the vice president knowingly manipulated health policy for political gain?" Denzel nodded. "I do. And you're about to hear it." And then, the second tape aired. People didn't just listen, they stopped what they were doing. Entire restaurants went quiet. Phones lit up. The footage was grainy, just audio, but it was real. Undeniable. JD Vance's voice slicing through every home in America like a knife. Phrases like "bury the cuts," "use the entertainers," and "too late to reverse" echoed across every platform. In Washington, the White House scrambled. A statement was drafted, then deleted. Advisors begged the president to distance himself. Meanwhile, 3 senators publicly called for an investigation. 2 more hinted at impeachment proceedings. But inside the vice president's residence, JD was fuming. His aides paced like rats on a sinking ship. "Release a countertape." One staffer urged. "We don't have one," another snapped. "He never stopped recording us. This is war." And it was the next day. Denzel walked into the courthouse to finalize the amended lawsuit. It wasn't just defamation anymore. It now included willful deception of the public, manipulation of legislative language for personal gain, and intent to defraud the American people. JD Vance tried to go live on television. He called it a smear. He accused Denzel of grandstanding. "This is all Hollywood," he said. "All emotion, no substance." But then, Gloria Hall came forward again. She held a press conference outside the Supreme Court steps, her voice shaking but stronger now. "They call it Hollywood," she said, "but my husband was real, his pain was real. And no spin can cover that truth." That single clip, just her face, her voice, reached 75 million views in 36 hours. Meanwhile, Denzel received an anonymous envelope at his office. Number name, no return address. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note. "He's been lying longer than you know. This one's older. This one's worse." His hands trembled slightly as he inserted the drive. On it was JD Vance. 10 years earlier, no title, just a Senate candidate at the time. But the words, the strategy, were the same. And this time, it wasn't just about Medicaid. It was about voter suppression. The footage was dusty and pixelated. It looked like it had been shot with a shaky camcorder, not a modern phone. The background showed a small private gathering, maybe a campaign fundraiser. Cheap lights, folding chairs. No press, no suits, no podiums. Just JD Vance, 10 years younger, holding a beer in one hand and pacing like a man trying to sell something he knew was poison, but wrapped in sugar. Denzel watched the video 3 times in silence before he spoke. His lawyer sat beside him, eyes locked on the screen, mouth tight. "This isn't just strategy," the lawyer finally said. "This is intent. Criminal intent." In the video, JD spoke to a room of maybe 30 men, all white, all dressed in shirt sleeves. His voice was casual, but his message was chilling. "Look," JD said, "we know where the numbers are. We know who votes and who doesn't. The trick isn't changing minds, it's reducing noise. Limit access in the districts where we lose. Make it look like administrative delay or fraud prevention. We don't need to cheat, we just need to exhaust them, quietly, legally." Someone off camera chuckled. JD kept going. "If you shave 10% off the other side's turnout and we hold steady, we win every time. It's not cheating, it's chess." The words hit harder than anything before. Denzel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This was never just about Medicaid," he whispered. "This man built his career on suppression and sabotage, and we've only scratched the surface." The legal team acted fast. Within 2 hours, They filed a motion to expand the lawsuit, now citing systemic disenfranchisement efforts, backed by historical recordings and corroborating evidence. The second motion named individuals present at the meeting, several of whom now held government contracts. The White House issued a statement that night. The administration is aware of the circulating materials and will cooperate fully with any lawful investigation. But it didn't sound like defense. It sounded like retreat. Inside JD's war room, panic was growing. He sat alone in his office, staring at his reflection in the black screen of the television turned off. Aides whispered outside. No one wanted to be the next to speak. He had always been calm, arrogant even, but now the calm had cracked. His foundation was wobbling, and he knew it. Because Denzel wasn't just attacking him, he was revealing him, and the public? They weren't turning away. They were tuning in. Across the country, millions were watching. Protests erupted outside courthouses. College students carried signs that read, "Don't silence us quietly, and this is not a movie, it's real life." Churches held candlelight vigils. Veterans posted video messages. Nurses wore black armbands. Denzel's stand had become a movement, one of the boldest. Moments came on live TV when a Republican congresswoman broke ranks during a panel. "We can't protect him anymore," she said. "The evidence is too much, and the consequences are too deep. This isn't left or right, this is right or wrong." Denzel, meanwhile, stayed grounded. He declined interviews, no tweets, number speeches. He spent his days reviewing files, coordinating witnesses, and preparing for what would come next, the federal hearing. The courtroom was larger now. Not a Senate chamber, a real federal court, packed wall to wall. The judge, appointed 3 decades earlier and known for his no-nonsense manner, took the bench without expression. Denzel sat at the plaintiff's table, calm, focused. Yade sat across from him, looking older, his jaw tight. "Mr. Washington," the judge said. "You may call your next witness." Denzel rose. "I call Trey Newell to the stand." Trey, the former advisor, walked to the stand slowly. He was sweating again, but steadier now. Under oath, he testified about policy meetings, draft documents that were later shredded, and the exact language JD used to justify legislative thinning. He described how JD used legal terms to hide brutal truths, how decisions that looked like minor bureaucratic edits actually erased coverage for thousands. Then, Denzel's lawyer played part of the second tape. Jade's voice saying, "We bury the cuts in language no one understands." JD's lawyer objected. "This is prejudicial." The judge leaned forward. "No, this is relevant." The room was dead quiet, but the most brutal moment came when Trey was asked, "Did JD Vance ever express remorse?" Trey looked down, then up, only once. When the polling numbers dropped, the court gasped. Jade flinched, but the day wasn't over. After court, Denzel received another envelope. This time, not from a whistleblower. This one was from JD's former chief of staff. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a printed transcript, meeting notes, undisclosed location, February 3. Lines highlighted in yellow included phrases like, "We'll deny everything. If it leaks, we'll say it's a deep fake. If Washington doesn't work, we'll move the plan to Ohio. We have someone inside the FDA, she'll stall things." The next name on the list was blacked out, but Denzel knew what it meant. This wasn't just about JD Vance anymore. This was bigger. And the next target might already be in place. The paper shook in Denzel's hand, not because he was afraid, but because he knew what it meant. Someone inside JD Vance's inner circle had just handed him a smoking gun. A printed transcript. Meeting notes from a secret strategy session. But what truly caught his attention wasn't the bold quotes about denying everything or manipulating the narrative. It was the final redacted name, someone high level, someone embedded inside the government. His lawyer read the note twice, jaw Tightening. This goes beyond healthcare cuts, he muttered. This is policy subversion at the federal level. If this is real, it is, Denzel said. And we need to find out who the blacked-out name belongs to before they act. That same day, they submitted the document to a confidential federal investigator already following the case. Within hours, a match was found. The name behind the black bar? Dr. Laura Morrow, a senior policy advisor at the Food and Drug Administration. She had no public scandals, no political statements. Her resume was clean, impressive. But the investigator discovered encrypted communications, emails from an undisclosed server, all routed through JD Vance's office. Some of the subject lines were vague. Delay pending? Trial freeze update? Media timing? Others were blunt. Halt the release. The contents were devastating. They revealed that Dr. Morrow had delayed the approval of a pediatric asthma medication, not because it failed trials, not because it was dangerous, but because JD's team believed that releasing the drug during a Medicaid funding debate would empower the opposition's narrative. In short, they let children suffer, just to protect JD's political image. When this evidence was presented in court, the room didn't erupt. It deflated. Like the air had been knocked out of it. Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood and said only this: children were pawns in a political game. And the players laughed behind closed doors. The judge's gavel hit the bench like thunder. This court will adjourn for 24 hours, he declared, so the Department of Justice may review the new evidence for potential criminal referrals. JD sat frozen. He couldn't deny it anymore. The second tape, the meeting notes, the FDA connection. The web had grown too wide, too tangled. Every time he tried to frame Denzel as emotional or theatrical, the facts kept pulling him deeper into Cull. The fire outside the courthouse. A crowd waited in absolute silence. Candles flickered in long lines. Someone played a recording of Gloria Hall's testimony over a speaker. Others held signs that said, "Justice isn't optional, and we are not invisible." And then something unexpected happened. One of JD Vance's former campaign managers, a man named Brad Torin, stepped forward on live television. Flanked by reporters, he held up a thick manila folder. "I was there," Brad said. "I helped build the machine. And I'm done lying." Inside that folder were donor contracts, private memos, and strategy documents. One memo described a cultural control campaign designed to discredit Hollywood voices, particularly black actors who spoke on policy. Denzel's name was mentioned twice, in quotes like, "He's too clean, dig deeper. Find something or manufacture the shadow. If he becomes a symbol, we lose the narrative." By the next morning, Denzel had become more than a plaintiff. He had become a mirror, reflecting every buried policy, every silent betrayal, every soul crushed under red tape. But as the pressure mounted, so did the danger. His team received a warning from a trusted source inside the Justice Department. "You're close. Too close. There's a second strategy memo. It's worse. It proves coordination with a media network." That memo hadn't been released yet. Someone was trying to erase it. That night, Denzel's legal office was broken into. No computers were stolen. No files taken. Just one folder. Memo B. Media complicity. Security footage showed two masked individuals, both trained, deliberate, in and out in under 3 minutes. No trace, no prints. But they made one mistake. They left behind a burner. Phone. Denzel single quotes S team powered it up in a secure lab. It contained only one message: "You were never supposed to see this. Walk away while you can." Denzel read it once, then deleted it. He turned to his lawyer and said, "Get me a press conference. We're not backing down. We're going louder." The next day, Denzel stood outside the courthouse with cameras flashing. "I was told to walk away," he said. But we don't walk away when the truth is under fire. We stand taller, we speak louder, and we don't stop. JD Vance, watching from a secure location, threw a glass across the room because he knew what was coming next at the final tape. And the one voice it featured was his own son. The sky above Washington was overcast, like it too was bracing for impact. Inside the federal courthouse, the atmosphere was heavier than it had ever been. Not loud, not chaotic, just dense, like the air knew what was coming. The gallery was full. Press, senators, activists, families, former staffers. The judge sat still, no gavel, no words. Just a breath held on behalf of a nation. Because today was the day the final recording would be played. The one no one saw coming. The one that would bring down more than just a man. It would expose the soul of a political machine. Denzel sat at the front. Composed, focused. Beside him, his lawyer clutched a sealed evidence bag. Inside it, a digital recorder recovered from the burner phone left behind by the break-in team. It had taken 2 days to decrypt, one anonymous source, and a federal warrant. What it revealed was something no one expected. The audio began with ambient noise, the sound of a private room, soft jazz in the background, and a familiar voice. JD Vance. But then, another voice. Quiet, hesitant, younger. His son. The court transcript later described the voice as belonging to Jacob Vance, Jade's 18-year-old son, a college student who had been present during several political retreats. On the tape, Jacob said, "Dad, I don't get it. I mean, you're always talking about helping people. But you told them to hold that asthma medication. You said they needed to learn dependency has a cost. What does that even mean?" Jade's voice was colder than ever. "It means the system's bloated. You don't fix a broken machine by feeding it more fuel. Sometimes you starve it until it resets," Jacob pressed. "But people are dying. Isn't that too far?" JD chuckled. "There's no too far in politics, only winners and losers. If they die quietly, no one remembers." In the courtroom, audible gasps rose. Jacob's voice cracked. "I don't want to be part of this." Then JD said something that would echo through history. "Then you're already weak, and this world doesn't reward weakness. It buries it." The courtroom erupted. The judge raised his gavel, but paused. His hand trembled. Slowly, he lowered it without striking, because this wasn't just evidence. It was revelation. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was grief. Denzel didn't speak for a long time. He just looked at the crowd. Not with triumph, not with rage. Just sadness. Finally, he stood. "I didn't come here to destroy a man," he said quietly. "I came here because justice means standing up even when it's not convenient, even when it hurts. What you just heard is not policy. It's cruelty wrapped in power." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Washington, do you have anything else to add before the court rules?" Denzel shook his head. "No, Your Honor. The truth has spoken." Hours later, the verdict came in. The court found Vice President JD Vance liable for defamation, malicious negligence, and public policy manipulation. The ruling demanded the full release of all private communications from his office during the Medicaid debates, a federal inquiry into policy obstruction at the FDA, and a permanent public record of the findings to prevent political erasure. Vance did not attend the final ruling. His motorcade never showed. His office released a short statement blaming distorted narratives and media frenzy. But no one listened. Because America had already made up its mind. In the days that followed, JD resigned quietly. Under pressure from both parties, several of his aides were subpoenaed. Dr. Laura Morrow disappeared from public life and was placed under internal investigation, and Jacob Vance, the boy who questioned his father, released a statement of his own. "I love my father, but love doesn't mean silence. And silence isn't safety anymore." As for Denzel, he didn't gloat. He didn't write a book. He didn't monetize a movement. He returned home, spent time with his grandchildren, visited community hospitals, and continued his quiet advocacy. But something had changed. Not just in him, in the nation. For weeks, the phrase "don't walk away" trended on billboards, podcasts, and social feeds. Millions quoted his courtroom speech. Teachers printed it. Churches recited it. Even school children wrote essays on it. Because this wasn't just about a trial. It was about courage. About standing in front of giants and saying, "You don't get to decide who matters." And as the sun finally broke through those gray Washington clouds, Denzel sat beneath a tree in his backyard, reading a letter from Gloria Hall. A short note. It simply read, "Thank you for giving him a voice. He would have been proud." He folded the letter and smiled.